Alright, this is a new teaching tool that hopefully this will help us review and things of that nature. For you having another source to go back and look at notes and listen and see the PowerPoints also. But we're starting over this unit. It's Unit 3.1, talking about just the characteristics of absolutism. It's a new government model that comes into European culture and politics in and around the 15 and 1600s, more late 1500s into the 1600s. And it's characterized by several things that we'll discuss. But these are guys and gals, these are the big dogs of Europe, the ones that have total control of their country in a way that a king or queen had never had before in Europe. And again, really the purpose of this review session is just to go over the characteristics of these rulers and then kind of the philosophy behind it that some people had. So we're going to go through that, and hopefully this is a good way again for us to review as you get down to the test to touch base on some of these again. Hopefully it will help you out. So, first thing to consider is that in this system, these men and women did not gain their power from the people. They didn't go vote for them. They didn't every November 6th or whenever election day is, they vote them in the electoral college, all that, and defeat an opponent. These people ruled until they died, until they were assassinated or whatever. And they ruled because they felt their power to rule came from God. This philosophy is called the divine right of kings. Okay, divine right of kings. Something that we have to understand, it's a big concept to know, is that God has granted that ruler the power and the ability to rule. And because of that, they are not subordinate to any Congress or Parliament or judicial body or legislative body that is in that country. They do what they want. Technically, we'll get into this here in a few minutes, is that they should do what God tells them to do. But in essence, at times some of these rulers would use God and God's reasoning as an excuse to get away with some things. But again, they get their power from God, and it's the idea that they are the country as well. Sovereignty of the country is the person. You're not loyal to America first, you're loyal to the person. Whether that's Louis XIV, Peter the Great, whoever that will be, you're loyal to that person first and foremost. The nobility, and that's something we've talked about throughout the first part of this class, is that at the rise of the new monarchs, these new kings had to fight the nobility for power and influence in their country. Well, these absolute rulers are going to bring them under control. And sometimes they are going to actually sell titles of nobility to the middle class, for example, that will rise up. And, if you give someone something, this title, this fancy, you're the Duke of whatever, the Earl of this, the Earl of that. Now these people know that they're in a powerful, respected position because of that absolute monarch. And they're not going to go against what the monarch says because they know that they're in a position of power because of that person. So that's a way kind of to twist the knife and be able to control the nobility, and that's what these monarchs were able to do. They also have very strong bureaucracies in which their government is organized, and that you have different tasks being carried out by multiple offices, multiple people. And again, this is a way that they're going to use, these monarchs will use the middle class to sniff out the nobility. Give these positions of bureaucracy to a middle class person and kind of leave the noble population out in the dark. And don't give them any rule or responsibility. Let the people of the middle class become loyal to you, because as we've learned, it's the middle class is becoming more powerful to begin with. Through the commercial revolution, they're beginning to gain this new wealth. It's coming in from exploration, coming in from trade. So the nobility are really being left on the outside anyway, and now politically, through this movement, they're also being left on the outside. A few more characteristics. We've talked extensively about the role of the Catholic Church and how the Reformation is lessening the role of the Church. That's going to continue to happen, especially in France and Spain, where the Catholic Church is still a major presence, more so in Spain than in France. But these rulers, even though they are Catholic, they're going to be able to put aside the loyalty to the Pope and rule their country first and listen to the Pope second. Whereas in the past, back in the 1400s Middle Ages, the secular rulers were subordinate to the Pope in every instance. So that's something to keep in mind. They maintained large standing armies. They didn't have to deal with mercenaries. Remember the guy who said you should never deal with mercenary armies. Let's see how I can do here. Writing the word. Work on that handwriting. Yeah, Machiavelli. Remember him. He said that you should never depend on those mercenary armies because what are they going to do to you? They'll go to the highest bidder. So these rulers are going to maintain standing armies who are loyal to the country. And who is the country? The ruler. So they're going to stay there, and they don't have to worry about the nobles rising up with their private armies because the standing army will be the strongest. Now, one thing we need to keep in mind, though, is that these guys, these absolute monarchs, will not have complete power. They won't have complete power in their society. And the reason why is that they don't have the technological access. They don't have the technology to be able to reach into people's lives as of this point. Now, we get to later when we talk in April or March later in the year, guys like Stalin and Hitler and others down the line, these guys are going to be able to reach into people's lives directly with different technological aspects and really influence the way people think. Propaganda, indoctrination, all these things. Louis XIV, Peter the Great, Henry IV, these men and women will not have the ability to go into the people's lives. They don't have that yet. We're going to get there eventually, but they're not complete totalitarian rulers because of their lack of access into people's lives in a technological sense. So, let's talk about a few important people who developed this theory of absolutism. The first is Jean Bodin. He was one of the first ones that came really around to this concept that you should have someone on the top of society really tells people what to do. A father figure who is able to control, dish out punishment if needed, and bring order to the chaos. Because keep in mind, French Civil Wars, this is when he was writing. Remember St. Bartholomew's? Let's see, how about this? St. Barty's. Okay? He is living during this time period. And he's seen the violence, and he doesn't see a strong person up front ruling and taking over and setting that example. So he says you need someone who's going to be out front to provide that law and order. And because of this context in which he's writing, that's really shaping his feelings and shaping his opinions. Next up is a guy we're going to talk about a lot, Thomas Hobbes. This is a key figure, not only in this time, but also a time called the Enlightenment, which we'll get to eventually. Thomas Hobbes writes a book called Leviathan. I believe it's in 1653. And as we're going to study a little bit later, around this time, actually just after, you have the English Civil War. So you got Bodin writing during the French Civil War as a religion, and now you have Hobbes writing during the English Civil War. So you see kind of the context in which these guys are writing. Chaos, mass confusion. We've got to have somebody step in and really, put things straight. And he had a pessimistic view of human nature. And pessimistic, that means it's a down view. He believed that people in their natural state, he believed they were solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, short. Yeah, short. How about that? That's what it says. I mean, people are pretty much crap. That's what I've told classes before, is that Hobbes thinks people are just pieces of crap. That's what he views, and that's what he's seen. Remember, context. It's what you grow up in. It's what you're seeing around you, and that's really shapes what he sees. And he thinks that there's no government to step in and control, that we're going to have anarchy. And again, going through that Civil War, he sees that all around him. And he believes, Hobbes does, that an absolute monarch, if you give someone the complete power, they're going to step in and they're going to prevent the people from killing each other to gain power. So you don't have that anarchy where there's chaos and all crazy stuff happening. That is something that he thinks someone should come in and put their foot down and be stern and really make sure that things don't go on and things go to crap. So that's Hobbes, and he did not support this divine right. He didn't think that God had given these kings the right. He didn't think God had really anything to do with it. He believes in something called the social contract. And he believed that when a government is formed, that the people are going to give up some of their rights in order for someone to be on that top position to protect them from killing each other. Even though they may lose some freedoms, you got to have protection. So they're going to give up some rights. So sign a contract, in theory, with an absolute monarch who will be able to protect them from their human nature. In this book, Leviathan, if you knew anything about like ocean culture, this is like a sea monster or something, Loch Ness monster, Godzilla. Actually, not Godzilla. My mom always would say Gongzilla, and we'd make fun of her, but don't worry about that. So you'd have Leviathan, sea monster. They'd see people as monsters. Gotta have someone protected. So that's Thomas Hobbes. Finally, we have Bishop Bossuet. This Catholic official, I think he's obviously a bishop. He's going to go on and actually be the tutor or one of the teachers for Louis XIV, who we're going to study way in depth here soon. But Bossuet is a principal advocate, what's known as divine right. And divine right, again, is the belief that God has given you the right to rule. And as you've read, the monarch is only responsible to God, and there is no social contract. People have no say in this. God has said, you are the ruler. I select you. And because of that, you are responsible to me alone. I'm going to lead you in the leadership that, again, I'm talking as God here. I don't know, I need a God voice or something. But you're going to lead as I lead you, but you don't have to follow the people's laws. You're subject to God's rules. That's it. Do the 10 Commandments, or I'll come down and get you if you don't. But you don't have to worry about the laws that are set in the land because I have selected you to rule. And again, Bossuet is going to be the big advocate for this. So what we have here, we've got two really schools of thought. We've got, in terms of how a ruler comes to be, we've got the divine right people, who are Bossuet, and a lot of the absolute monarchs would be this. So you have the divine right who says, God has given me power. And then you have the social contract. Handwriting is getting bad. There we go. Social contract who says that the people sign an agreement and say, save us, O king, because we are stupid and we like to kill each other with our guns and pitchforks because we're selfish and we're nasty. And that is more of the line of thinking that Thomas Hobbes believes. And then Bodin is somewhere in the middle. But just know these two arguments, know these three guys, and know those characteristics, because we're going to start applying those characteristics to specific cases. We're going to start with France. We'll move on to places in Eastern Europe, and then we'll talk about a little more of this concept right here, the social contract, as related to England specifically, and the relationship between the king and parliament. So again, hopefully this was helpful. It's a study tool, review for the test. I'm going to leave them up the whole year, so when we get to reviewing for the final and then for the AP test, these will be very helpful for you. I hope that they work out great. So let me figure out how to stop it. And I'll do it right here. Yeah, that's that button. All right. Like this.